Welcome back to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we are unpacking a mystery that has completely gripped a community. And honestly, it's left seasoned investigators totally stumped. We're looking at the deeply baffling disappearance of a 15-year-old boy named Sebastian Rogers. Now, to really grasp how wild this is, picture the setting. It's late February 2024. You're in a quiet, highly secure residential neighborhood in Sumner County, Tennessee. This isn't someone getting lost out in the deep wilderness. This is a teenager who walked out of his own bedroom in a densely populated suburb and just vanished, stepped right off the face of the earth. No broken doors, no obvious signs of a struggle, just a neighborhood packed with ring cameras and security systems that somehow caught almost nothing definitive.
Leaving behind his shoes, his phone, and zero physical tracks. Just take a second and imagine that. A 15-year-old boy simply vanishing from his own home in the dead of the night. It is a terrifying reality. In our hyper-connected world, right, we just assume there's always a digital footprint, a scent trail for the dogs, a camera angle catching every move. The modern world is always watching. But with Sebastian, all those usual breadcrumbs that law enforcement relies on just aren't there. It is literally a locked door mystery happening right out in the open. And I gotta tell you, the deeper you look into what was left behind, the more inexplicable the whole thing gets.
Section 1. The impossible vanishing, a boy disappears. So this brings us to what makes this case so extraordinarily confounding. To really understand the depth of this mystery, we have to look at the victim himself. Sebastian is a high-functioning autistic teenager. Now, when you start factoring in his personality, his daily routines, his comfort zones, and his specific behavioral traits, this sudden, trackless disappearance goes from being highly unusual to feeling almost completely impossible. This is a teenager who absolutely thrived on routine, on the familiar, and on the feeling of safety in his own environment.
Here's where things get really strange. Because of his autism, Sebastian had certain sensory sensitivities. For example, he was known to be very uncomfortable walking barefoot outside. It's just something he simply would not do. Yet, if we look at the physical reality of the scene that morning, it tells a totally contradictory story. His shoes, sitting right by the door. His cell phone, which is basically a lifeline for most teenagers, was left completely untouched on the kitchen counter. And keep in mind the environment here. We are talking about freezing cold February air in Tennessee. Leaving the house voluntarily without shoes or a heavy winter jacket makes absolutely zero sense for anyone, but definitely not for Sebastian, given his profound aversion to being barefoot outdoors. It immediately frames this whole thing as totally out of character, raising this horrifying possibility that whatever happened that night wasn't his choice.
Moving on to Section 2, Timeline of the Night, February 25th to 26th. To try and figure out how this happened, we really need to zoom in on this specific window of time. Let's reconstruct exactly how a totally mundane Sunday evening turned into a family's absolute worst nightmare by Monday morning. Understanding this narrow timeline is crucial for making sense of the massive investigation that followed.
Okay, let's walk through these critical hours. Sebastian lived with his mother Katie and his stepfather Seth. According to his mom, February 25th was just a completely normal day. Started and ended like any other. They had dinner together, and eventually she told him it was time for bed. He goes into his room to sleep wearing a black hoodie and sweatpants. The house is locked up, the lights go out, everything is perfectly still. But fast forward to the middle of the night, specifically 3:10 a.m. We get this really mysterious moment where nearby CCTV captures figures moving in the dark. We'll get into the frustrating details of that footage in just a sec. But then, the undeniable, visceral reality hits at 6 a.m. on February 26th. His mom walks into his room to wake him up for school, fully expecting to see her son asleep in bed. Instead, the bed is completely empty. In the span of a single, quiet night, Sebastian was just gone.
Section 3. The CCTV clue, searching the darkness. So, that terrifying morning discovery instantly kicks off a desperate search, focusing right away on the immediate area around the house. When law enforcement gets there, one of their very first moves is bringing in specialized search dogs. But almost immediately, investigators hit a massive brick wall. The tracking dogs couldn't pick up a solid, continuous scent trail past the family's driveway. It was as if he literally vanished into thin air, or maybe got pulled into a vehicle the very second he stepped off the property line.
The sheer scale of this response, especially when you compare it to the utter lack of physical evidence, is honestly staggering. Within hours of that 6 a.m. discovery, an official Amber Alert blankets the region. You've got hundreds of search and rescue volunteers pouring into Sumner County, working day and night. We're talking bloodhounds tracking on the ground, helicopters with thermal imaging up in the air, and eventually full-scale FBI involvement. Together, they scoured thousands of acres of dense Tennessee woods. They dragged local ponds. They canvassed every single street for miles. The human effort and tactical resources
resources here were monumental, and yet this massive coordinated sweep yielded zero physical results. No clothing, no footprints, literally no clues.
So with no scent and no physical tracks on the ground, investigators had absolutely no choice but to turn to the digital eyes of the neighborhood, the local security cameras. And they actually found something. Around 3:10 a.m. on the night he vanished, a neighbor's camera picked up a potential lead. Through the pitch black, this grainy footage showed two mysterious flashlight beams moving near the family home, followed closely by what looked like two dark, indistinct figures. Which leads to this massive, chilling question, right? Was one of those figures Sebastian? Or was someone else entirely lurking outside his home in the dead of night while the family slept?
Now, you would think this is the major break in the case. Finding figures outside the home of a missing kid, that is exactly the kind of lead investigators pray for. But instead, it just added to the immense frustration. Police and federal agencies analyzed that footage to death, trying to enhance every single pixel. But unfortunately, between the pitch-black lighting of the neighborhood at 3 in the morning, combined with the incredibly low resolution of that specific camera, absolutely no official confirmation could be made. They couldn't tell who was in the video, how tall they were, what they were wearing, nothing. So this highly anticipated digital clue, it basically just left a frantic public and seasoned investigators with way more questions than answers.
Which brings us to Section 4, Suspicions and the Search, a Complicated Turn. As days turned into weeks, and weeks agonizingly turned into months without a single sign of the missing teenager, that total lack of physical evidence created a massive vacuum of information. And as we see all the time with high-profile true crime cases these days, that vacuum was quickly and aggressively filled with intense online speculation. And it took the whole case in a very dark, complicated direction.
You can really see this massive divide here between public theory and the official investigation, and understanding it is crucial. On one hand, you have internet sleuths and true crime communities scrutinizing literally every single action the family took. People questioned the timelines, like why the stepfather left for work so early that morning. They heavily criticized the family's decision to move an RV away from the property shortly after the disappearance. But on the other side of things, law enforcement is maintaining a strict, impartial, evidence-based stance. Police and investigators are on the record stating that all family members have fully cooperated, sat down for interviews, and provided access. But here's the catch. Because there is zero physical evidence to point them anywhere, authorities can't officially rule out foul play either. They are forced to keep every single option, no matter how grim, right on the table.
Section 5. The ongoing mystery, where is Sebastian? This brings us to the most painful, ongoing reality of all right now. Where is he today? It's been months since he disappeared from that quiet Tennessee bedroom, leaving an absolutely unfillable void in the community. But the search has not stopped, not even close. His biological father, Seth Rogers, has been incredibly vocal and visible in the media. He, alongside a dedicated army of volunteers, is out there relentlessly searching every single day. They're handing out flyers, organizing search parties, and just pleading with the public not to let this case fade into the background, begging everyone to keep their eyes open. Was he lured out, or did he wander off? This really is the core unanswered question of the entire case. How does a teenager vanish from a highly monitored neighborhood without leaving a single, solitary trace? Think back to his intense discomfort with being barefoot. Was he somehow lured out of his home by someone he trusted, someone who convinced him to leave his shoes behind? Or did he, against all of his known daily habits and sensory aversions, just wander off into the freezing, pitch-black night entirely on his own? Without a single footprint in the mud or a clear video frame to guide us, honestly, both scenarios seem entirely impossible. And yet, one of them has to be the truth.
So what do you think happened to Sebastian Rogers? We are literally staring at a mystery that defies all logic. And it's exactly these kinds of baffling cases that need public awareness the absolute most. The answers might actually still be out there, maybe buried in a tiny detail someone hasn't remembered yet, or a piece of footage someone hasn't checked. So please drop your thoughts, your observations, and your theories down in the comments. We really encourage you to engage with the facts we've gone over in this explainer today. If you want to help keep cases like this alive so families can eventually find the answers they so desperately need, remember to keep discussing, keep sharing, and keep searching. Thanks for joining me today, and stay safe out there.